Hello, and welcome to the podcast Justice Unbound, about women, religion, and the State of Israel. In this podcast, we take you behind the closed doors of the Israeli rabbinic courts, where all hearings are held in camera, closed to the public, and where the state applies religious laws to decide the fate of women trapped in marital captivity, agunot, of children stigmatized because of their mother's sexual partners, mamzerim, of converts who do not keep the Sabbath, and where citizens are cross-examined about whether they are Jewish enough, and much, much more. Justice Unbound is written and produced by the Center for Women's Justice, CWJ. I'm your host, Susan Weiss, a divorced lawyer with a PhD in sociology and anthropology, and the founder of the Center for Women's Justice.
And I'm your host, Rivkah Lubitch, a rabbinic pleader who represented women in Israeli rabbinic courts. I'm also a religious feminist.
In today's episode, we will be talking about polygamy and whether it is permitted in Israel. Can a Jewish Israeli man marry more than one wife without being put in jail? In the last episode, we explained how Jewish law is the official law of the land in Israel when it comes to all matters relating to marriage and divorce. Because Jewish law does not permit a woman to be divorced until her husband agrees to deliver a Jewish writ of divorce, a get to his wife, Israeli law enables a man to anchor his wife indefinitely in their failed marriage, condemning her forever to marital captivity. So here are the questions that we will be exploring for this episode. If Jewish law rules, does that mean that Israel permits men to take multiple wives? After all, we all know the stories from the Bible about Abraham and Jacob. They had multiple wives. Jacob had 4, so what about your modern Israeli man? Is polygamy permitted in Israel, or is it a crime? If it's a crime, what's its punishment? Is it grounds for divorce? Is it possible that the state expressly permits a man to take a second wife?
And of course, to unpack all this, we will draw from our all-too-large arsenal of disturbing stories. This one we have entitled 2 Wives. One day, I got a phone call from a woman. After she told me her name, she started ranting that her husband had married a second wife and that the rabbis weren't doing anything to punish him or to facilitate her divorce. And she wanted her freedom and justice. She was having a fit. I can still hear her screaming in my ear. I could barely get in a word. She was so upset. And she seemed to know her rights. When I finally was able to ask her a question, I understood that, unlike our last client who was illiterate, the woman yelling in my ear was an accomplished professional. She was sophisticated, secular, academic, with a good job, who could not figure out how to get divorced. Not only had her husband obviously committed adultery, not only had he abandoned her and had a child with another woman, he had actually married this other woman. And although our new client had been in the rabbinic courts for 3 full years asking for a divorce, she was still married.
Back up, Rivkah. I know that men can be bad husbands. They can leave their wives, abandon any responsibility to them and to their children, and they can go live with another woman and have children with her. Is that what this husband did? That would be bad enough and should be grounds for divorce. But let's put the matter of what is a cause of action for divorce aside for a while. What do you mean when you said that the husband married another woman? Did a rabbi officially licensed by the state officiate at this man's wedding to someone else?
No. Well, yes and no. A rabbi formally married the new couple, but he did not have a license from the state to do so. And I'll explain. The husband hired an Orthodox rabbi to conduct a private religious Jewish ceremony in order to sanctify his new relationship. The rabbi brought kosher witnesses to the sanctification ceremony. Also, the rabbi made sure that a quorum of 10 men were present, a minyan, while the man gave his new second wife a ring and said the words, Harei at mikudeshet, you are hereby sanctified with this ring to me in accordance with the laws of Moses and Israel. The witnesses were there to confirm that the husband took this particular woman as his wife, and the quorum was necessary to show that he was doing the taking in a public manner for all to see. In other words, the hired rabbi made sure that all the formalities of Jewish law were met in order that the new couple be considered married in accordance with religious rules.
So does Jewish law recognize such an unofficial marriage? Is it binding?
Is the marriage valid and binding under Jewish law? The answer is yes. It is valid and binding, but it is a bit more complicated. Polygamous marriage is valid and binding under Jewish law, but it is rabbinically prohibited, and I'll explain. According to Torah law, biblical law, a man can take or marry as many women as he can support. And that is how men married for many thousands of years. Only in the 11th century in Ashkenaz Europe, Central and Eastern Europe, did the rabbis decide that men are prohibited from marrying a second wife without divorcing the first one. Some academics suggest that this takana, rabbinic new ruling, was in response to Christianity. Canon law prohibited polygamy and did not allow for divorce at all. We Jews in Europe were not looking very good. Jewish law permitted polygamy and allowed men to divorce their wives at will. So the rabbis probably were influenced by the new trends of monogamous and eternal marriages and shifted Jewish law to fall in line with these new ideas. So they issued new rulings that both prohibited polygamy and required a woman's agreement to divorce. But the rabbis didn't have the power or didn't think they had or have the power to do away with the laws of the Torah, the Bible. All they can do is say that a man who marries a second wife will be punished in some way or banned from the community. But the marriage stands, it's valid and binding. So if the second wife in our case wanted to leave her husband, the rabbis would demand that she receive a Jewish writ of divorce from him, a get, before she can marry anyone else. If she just walked away from the marriage and had a relationship with another man, her children would be stigmatized.
Rivkah, and what if the husband just walked away from this second marriage and had a child with a third woman? Would his children be stigmatized?
No, they would not be stigmatized. According to Jewish law, marriage is something totally different for a man than for a woman. A Jewish marriage is not about forging a partnership based on love and respect. As we started to explain in the last episode, Jewish marriage is basically a purchase agreement. In Jewish marriage, a man takes or acquires or buys a woman, and a woman is taken, acquired, or bought by a man. So when a man marries, or more accurately takes a woman, there is no change in the man's status, just the woman's. And for that reason, a man can take or purchase more wives, but a woman cannot be taken by any other man. She is already owned, if you like, by her husband, and she cannot do the purchasing. The term marriage is very confusing when it's used to refer to the legal consequences of a Jewish wedding. If a man misappropriates another man's wife, has sex with her, a child born from that misappropriation is stigmatized. But if he takes a woman who does not belong to anybody else, that's okay. Children born to him with a woman who doesn't belong to another man are okay. They are not stigmatized.
Is this how marriage works in Israel? It's a unilateral purchase agreement? What about people who marry outside of Israel in Jewish ceremonies?
Yes, marriage is a unilateral purchase contract, not a vow of loyalty and partnership. And since all Jews in Israel must marry in accordance with Jewish law, every time you attend a Jewish wedding in Israel, or wherever you live, you are witnessing a man purchasing his wife, not an exchange of vows. This is the same for Jewish couples marrying in the Jewish way all over the world.
Like me. I was purchased in New York City.
Okay, we just don't realize it when we go to a wedding and we smile and dance the hora.
Okay, Rivkah. So now our listeners know that Jewish law prohibits, but still recognizes bigamy as a valid form of marriage. The second marriage is not null and void. But let's complicate things even more. While the bigamous marriage of our client is valid and at the same time prohibited under Jewish law, it is also valid and prohibited under Israeli law. It is a crime. Under Section 176 of the Israeli Penal Code, a man can be put in jail for up to 5 years for having married 2 women. But the marriage is still a marriage, since it is recognized under halakha, under Jewish law. In short, and to paraphrase a Jewish joke about a kosher chicken that falls in a toilet, and my apologies to any sensitive listener to this joke if it offends, bigamy under Jewish law and under Israeli law is kosher, but it stinks. But let's get back to our case. What happened? Did you represent the woman in the rabbinic court? Since the marriage is prohibited under Jewish law as well as a crime under the penal code, Shouldn't that be grounds for divorce under Jewish law in an Israeli rabbinic court?
Well, I did represent the woman. The rabbinic judges, the Dayanim, were shocked to hear that the man had married a second wife, but they weren't shocked enough to issue any ruling against him, or even to put any psychological pressure on him in any way to give his first wife a get. They were not going to allow his wife the same freedom that her husband had had to start a new family, because, and as we already explained, marrying another woman is permitted according to the biblical law. I did in fact try to argue that marrying a second wife was such a terrible offense against my client, against Jewish law, as well as a crime, that this was reason enough for the rabbis to at least issue a ruling that the husband should give her a get. But the Dayanim just didn't see things that way. I can't even say that they were mad at the husband. Their attitude was one of indifference, or more accurately, indulgence for the naughty behavior of the husband. It's as if they were saying to him, no, what can we do? Boys will be boys. And it was quite obvious to me that the rabbis were not going to in any way cooperate with my attempt to argue that they should order the husband to divorce his wife. Just between the two of us, and now our listeners, I'd say that the rabbis were even sympathetic to the husband. His wife had filed in the civil courts to adjudicate all money matters. The rabbis thought he should be getting a better deal with respect to the marital property. So they were basically willing to join forces with the husband to pressure his wife into accepting his money terms for the get in exchange for her freedom.
Oh, wow. So what finally happened? Did our client get her get?
Well, the wife pressed the police to bring criminal charges both against the husband as well as against the rabbi who conducted the private wedding ceremony. She also sued in the family court for damages. She made so much noise that the husband finally agreed to the divorce. But neither the rabbinic judges nor the police were really of any help to her. The rabbis did not formally order the husband to divorce his wife, and the police did not press charges. The wife just screamed loud enough.
Oh boy, Rivkah, once again, there is so much wrong with this story and so many open questions, like what type of damage claim did the wife have? Why didn't the police press charges? But again, the thing that stands out the most for me is the response of the rabbinic courts in the face of a husband's abandonment of his wife, blatant adultery and criminal activity. What exactly is the role of a rabbinic court or of the rabbinic judges, the Dayanim? What do they do if they cannot do justice for women whose criminal husband abandoned her and cheated on her? Do they really think that this is an example of a successful dispute resolution? Who do they represent?
These are indeed questions that we will continue to explore.
I think we will wrap this up for now. Again, this has been a lot for our listeners to absorb. We hope you'll stay with us for more. We have so much to talk about. Thank you for listening to the Center for Women's Justice's podcast, Justice Unbound, Women, Religion, and the State of Israel. We would love to hear your comments and thoughts. Please reach out to us on social media and on the Center for Women's Justice's page on Facebook, X, Instagram, or LinkedIn.
This podcast was produced thanks to the generous support of the Gimprich Family Foundation. Thank you, Hannah Wacholder, Katzman, and Rachel Stomel for your help. I am Rivkah Lubitch.
And I am Susan Weiss. Thank you for listening.